Now, there are a lot of young wrestlers with exceptional talent, but what really interested us was Manard's great attitude in the face of extraordinary obstacles. As Bernard Goldberg learned firsthand, Kyle Manard gives overcoming adversity a whole new meaning.
When we first met Kyle Manard last January, he was a 17-year-old senior at Collins Hill High School in suburban Atlanta. He was also one of the top 5 wrestlers in the entire state in his weight class. But what really impressed us about Kyle Manard was that he'd accomplished all this with no arms and no legs.
Tell me about your condition.
Doctors have no idea what caused the disorder to happen. It's technically called congenital amputation. I was born with it, and it's pretty much just a disorder where the arms end at the elbows and the legs end at the knees. I really believe that it was just kind of God's will and my own personal fate.
If you're looking for a victim, you'll need to look someplace else. He may not get up the stairs exactly like you or me, but he does get up the stairs. In high school, he was an A student who typed just like his classmates on a regular keyboard, just faster. And his handwriting is better than that of most people with 10 fingers. Video games? He's a whiz at that too. He uses a motorized chair to get around, but that's about the only special equipment he's ever used. He tried prosthetic devices a long time ago, but he didn't feel comfortable with them.
Being born this way, has really kind of taught me just to adapt, just like anybody else would. Everybody's got hardships in their life, I believe. A baby's got to figure out how to open up a jar. I had to figure out a little bit different way.
You don't see it as if you have any kind of disability?
No, I honestly don't. I have no idea what it's like to, to get up and run around, but I know that I can pretty much do the same things that anybody else can, maybe a little bit more in some cases.
The way Kyle Manard sees things, it's not good enough to do well for a guy with no arms and no legs. His goal is simply to do well, period.
Drive him! Drive him!
When we first saw him wrestle back in high school in the 103-pound weight class, the first word that came to mind was relentless. He never stops. And after a while, we started to feel sorry, not for the guy with no arms or legs, but for his opponent.
That's the way I go after the guys. I perpetually try to score. Even if I'm winning by a lot, the team needs pins.
When he was first born, we were concerned about what he was going to be able to do.
Kyle's parents, Scott and Anita, had to decide whether they would coddle their son, whether they would focus on what he couldn't do. After a while, they came to the conclusion that if they treated him as if he were totally normal, that he would start to see himself the same way.
We have chosen to treat Kyle just as our girls. He has 3 sisters, and it's just very important to us to not focus on the disability, just on his abilities.
Is there a tendency, or was there in his earlier years, to want to help him with everything? And
that was me. I was the softie, so I was gonna help him forever and ever, and his dad said, nope, he's gonna feed himself. He's gonna learn how to do it.
Gonna starve.
And of course he didn't mean that. His dad helped me realize that he needed to do things on his own.
Yeah, there are some things that he's taught himself. Like, the spoon thing, I still can't figure out, how he can flip that spoon around like that.
Was there ever a moment where you said, I'm just not going to be a victim? I'm not going to let these disabilities affect my life?
When I was young, I pretty much made that decision. After seeing my friends play, that I wasn't going to let them go out there and have fun while I was going to sit back and watch from the bleachers, so it wasn't going to happen. And football became, was my primary sport in 6th grade.
Wait a second. You also played football?
I did. I played defensive lineman. And running back would come at me, and I wasn't about to move. I would just plant myself in his legs and take him out.
It may sound crazy, but it all makes perfect sense, as long as you understand one thing, that Kyle Manard has never believed that there's anything wrong with him. Nothing that hard work and the right attitude can't overcome.
Come on, Kyle, work it!
His father was a high school wrestler, and that's what got Kyle started in the sport.
Go, go, go!
But when the coach first saw him, he wasn't nearly as confident as Kyle was.
And I saw him, I said to myself, boy, we really got our work cut out for us on this one here.
Cliff Ramos is the head wrestling coach at Collins Hill and started working with Kyle and his father when Kyle was only in 6th grade.
How did he do the first year?
Not very well, to be honest with you. I didn't think he'd ever win a match. And he didn't win a match the first year.
Was there a sense of, geez, I'm just terrible at this?
Oh, yeah.
You never thought about quitting?
Quitting, was definitely a thought that crossed my mind in 6th grade.
Which only makes sense. He had lost his first 35 matches.
How'd you turn it around?
I weight trained a ton. I used 2.5-pound weights and put them on each arm. Got my form with the light weight and just kept moving up.
And up, and up. During his senior year in high school, he lifted 240 pounds 23 times and won an unofficial World's Strongest Team competition in his weight class.
23 repetitions. How about over Kyle Manard?
There's never been anybody like Kyle. I defy anybody anywhere to find a wrestler or an athlete who can compete against able-bodied competitors and do what he's done.
When we first met Kyle, his record in Georgia's toughest high school wrestling division was 23 wins and 8 losses. Kyle Maynard's disadvantages are obvious, but is it possible that he actually has an advantage? One that has nothing to do with his wrestling ability. Consider this. In a sport where the whole idea is to get a hold on your opponent, how do you grab a guy who has no arms and no legs? It may not be politically correct to ask, but is it possible that Kyle Maynard actually has an unfair advantage?
I came in knowing he was really strong, stronger than me, just because he's just like one giant muscle.
For Chris Neal, wrestling Maynard was, as you might imagine, unlike anything he'd ever experienced.
When you're pinning someone, usually you have to reach underneath their arm, and since his arms are so much smaller, he can just pop them out.
There are some advantages.
Bud Henneball is a Georgia high school referee who'd watched over the years as Kyle's opponents tried to figure him out.
They're always trying to work at his head because I just don't think they know any better or there's any other way. But I'd say his disadvantages far outweigh the advantages.
But for Kyle Maynard, who is now a freshman at the University of Georgia, disadvantages are merely obstacles to be overcome.
Good to meet you. A lot of them didn't, know what I was about, and they wondered if they could help me. They wondered if they were supposed to feel sorry for me or if there's that. I obviously don't want any of that, sympathy from anybody, and I just want people to look at me as normal.
And he's still wrestling. He's on the school's intercollegiate club team. But the biggest changes have occurred away from the mat. He's now a much sought-after motivational speaker. He's even done some modeling. This is part of an Abercrombie & Fitch campaign. And after our story aired on Real Sports, Larry King had him on his show. And maybe most important, he's embarked on a new romance.
How did you meet Kyle?
He came to my school to give a speech, and I was very inspired by his talk. It took my breath away, actually.
She's beautiful, and she's funny, and we've got a great relationship.
Oh yeah, he's also taken up judo. Why not?
It's very similar to wrestling, and I don't think it should surprise anybody that I want to compete in a combative sport like that.
And it shouldn't surprise anyone either that just a few weeks ago, Kyle Maynard got his first belt in martial arts. How does he do so many things so well? Maybe it's because he just never learned how to feel sorry for himself.
You can't give up. You can't give up in the face of adversity, and you just got to keep on trudging on. It's all about experiences, and the more you can experience and the more problems you can solve for yourself, that's what's going to make you enjoy just being around every day.
Bernie, did Kyle ever consider wrestling for the University of Georgia? Was that an option?
Yeah, he would have liked to wrestle intercollegiately, NCAA.
Yeah.
But they don't have that at Georgia. So he joined the wrestling club, and he's still wrestling, and they wrestle against other college clubs.
What's he studying?
He's studying public speaking. He's a motivational speaker. Big surprise there, right?
What a shock, yeah.
And he goes around the country when he can, and he actually speaks and pumps people up.
And since your piece, has he become a mini celebrity of sorts, or is it no big deal to him?
Well, they're two different questions. To him, I don't think it's ever been a big deal, but yes, he has. He was a cover story in USA Today. He's been in a national ad as Rising Stars in America. He's doing quite well.
Still one of the most amazing kids you ever encountered, yeah?
Absolutely. I said to you the last time, there's good and bad with this guy. The good is that he's so inspirational. The bad is you can't complain about anything without feeling like a jerk.
All right, Bern, thanks very much. Happy